You know the story of what's happened inside the country. The economy is in shambles. The people's freedom has been trampled on. And the resistance shows more and more courage and capability every day. In the region, as I've said, the Arab states and Israel have come together in a powerful coalition, alliance to stop Tehran. And in the world, the regime in Tehran is increasingly isolated. And just think of the regime in Tehran. Think of the great history of the Persian people, that at this moment, all they could do to try to raise themselves up a bit was to turn to other kleptocrats, autocrats, and tyrants throughout the world. So it's time. Even the JCPOA really is in its final days. The truth is, it is dead, and all that remains is for the Biden administration to bury it, to acknowledge its death, leave the negotiations, force Iran to deal with that reality, and be strong with the countries, and most of all, support the movement for freedom in Iran. Now, our best allies, I speak of America, I speak of the civilized democracy of the world, our best allies against the Islamic Republic of Iran are the people of Iran. And that is where your leadership comes in. I had somebody say to me once, who was a leader of one of the intelligence agencies in the Middle East, speaking about Iran's nuclear program, that the only time the mullahs in Tehran will seriously negotiate an end of their nuclear program is the day that they think they must do it to save their regime. They don't feel that way yet, although they should. And it remains for us to put that pressure on them in every way, and nothing will move them more than an uprising of the people. The reality is, as we call for a revolution in Iran, the revolution has already begun. The revolution has begun with the thousands of fighters of the resistance, of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, of the MEK in Iran. And it will not be stopped until this regime is dead and gone. Now, in the rest of the world outside of the Middle East, this is the moment for all of us who believe in freedom to stand firm and not be tricked by the regime or bullied by it into doing things that are inconsistent with our values and our interests. The deal with the devil that Belgium seems to want to make for this alleged exchange of prisoners, which you have fought so successfully, is an example of what should not be done. That will only encourage the regime in Tehran to carry out more acts of terrorism, such as the one they planned against the meeting organized by this group. Fight on in court, dear friends, and let that be an example to every other country in the world. There is no peace by trying to tame the beast that controls the government in Iran. I want to say to you, as a former United States Senator, what a thrill it was not only to hear the senators who spoke to you, but to look up on that board pictures and to know 11 senators. What I was really encouraged by is that the bipartisanship that existed in the American government in our Iran policy, which was broken in 2015 in the fight over JCPOA, is returning again. You could see it in that group. You could see it in the statements made from senators from both parties. You can see it in the resolutions that have been passed in Congress, and you can see it most recently in the legislation introduced by Democratic Senator Menendez and Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, and that can and must continue. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the people of Iran to rise up together to liberate themselves. It's time for the United States and every democratic nation in the world to help them. It's time for us to recognize that within this movement, NCRI and MEK, there are leaders who are ready to preside over the coming of freedom to Iran, to give the people a choice of their leaders, not to impose leaders from the top. And that, may I say, begins with your own and our own Mrs. Maryam Rajavi. We will do everything we can together, and I am confident, sooner than most people think, that we are in the final days of the regime in Iran, the kleptocratic, autocratic, repressive, theocratic, anti-freedom regime. I know there are those who will say that I am either a naive dreamer or a political fool or naive, but think of history. They said that about the Americans who fought England in our struggle for freedom. They said it about the British, when the British were the only country remaining to be willing to resist the movement of Nazism across Germany. But in each of and every one of those circumstances, yes, after occasional setbacks, those leaders of the resistance triumphed, and so did freedom. So I am not a naive dreamer. I am a political realist, and it is from that realism that I know that if we together work and will it, it is no dream. I've mentioned the Brits. Winston Churchill said famously during the Second World War, and somebody was good enough to give this to me engraved on a piece of metal that I keep on my desk. He said, "Never, never, never quit." And we all say tonight, we will never, never quit until freedom comes to the people of Iran. And believe me, with your leadership and our help and God's help, that day is coming soon. So I say, as I always like to say, now, my favorite word in Persian, and it was already said by this great crowd, Hazer, 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 Hazer.